The so what test is a tool you use to decide whether your study rises to the level of research or whether it is still operating as a personal, professional, or local question. It is not a test of interest, relevance, or usefulness. It is a test of consequence. Specifically, it asks whether the issue you are studying has long-term implications that extend beyond one setting and matter at a broader, societal level over time. It helps to be clear from the start about what the so what test is and is not. It is not a way to justify why you care about a topic. It is not a way to defend your job, your district, or your program. And it is not a strategy for making a topic sound more impressive than it is. The purpose of the so what test is to force your study to answer a harder question. If this research never happens, what is the long-term cost? And who ultimately bears it? The reason many people struggle with this test is because they stop too early. They answer why something is useful or interesting and assume that is enough. It is not. Usefulness explains value in the short term. Research significance requires consequence over time. The so what test exists to move your thinking from what is happening now to what becomes normalized if nothing changes. To use the so what test, you start by stating your topic in one clear sentence. Then you ask so what? You do not stop at the first answer. You keep asking until you either reach a defensible long-term consequence or realize you cannot yet. The first so what almost always produces a local answer. It usually sounds like this matters to my school, my district, my organization, or my role. That answer fails the test, not because it is wrong, but because it is contained. Questions that only explain why something matters in one place belong to program evaluation or internal improvement, not to research meant to inform a field. The second so what usually shifts toward short-term benefit. This is where people talk about efficiency, reduced stress, improved engagement, or better outcomes right now. This still does not pass the test. Short-term benefit explains why something is helpful, but it does not explain why it needs to be studied at scale. At this point, many people stop, and this is where topics get stuck. The third so what is where the test actually works. This is where you are forced to zoom out across time and repetition. Now the question is no longer about one setting. It is about what happens when the same choices are made again and again across systems. This is where you name long-term impact, risk, or cost that accumulates over years and across populations. If you cannot get to this level, your study does not pass the test yet. It is important to understand that many topics fail the so what test in predictable ways. They are too tied to personal relevance. They stay descriptive instead of consequential. Or they never articulate what happens if the pattern continues unexamined. Failing the test does not mean the idea is bad. It means it is unfinished. Here is an example of a topic that fails the so what test. I want to study how teachers in my district are using AI tools. So what? Because the district is adopting AI and wants to understand teacher use. So what? Because that information could help leaders decide what training or tools to provide. This fails the test because the consequence never leaves the district. The outcome is improved internal decision-making. That may be responsible and practical, but it does not constitute a research problem with broader significance. This kind of topic is especially tempting because it sounds legitimate. It feels grounded and useful. Many people stop here because it looks like real work. But usefulness in one organization is not the same thing as contribution to the field. The so what test exists to make that distinction clear. Now compare that with a topic that passes the so what test. I want to study how AI tools are being used as supports for neurodivergent learners, and how that use affects independence over time. So what? Because AI tools are increasingly functioning as scaffolds for communication, executive functioning, and emotional regulation. So what? Because AI tools are increasingly functioning as scaffolds for communication, executive functioning, and emotional regulation. So what? Because when support systems are implemented without intentional scaffolding toward autonomy, they can reduce struggle in the short term while quietly increasing dependence in the long term. So what? Because when these patterns are repeated across systems, they can shape life trajectories, influencing independence, self-regulation, workforce participation, and overall quality of life at scale. The difference between these two examples is not the topic area. It is the level of consequence. The unsuccessful example never moves beyond local relevance. The successful example connects everyday practices to long-term, systemic outcomes. That is the threshold the so what test is designed to enforce. This distinction matters even more in areas like AI and education because it is easy to stop at immediate positives. Reduced anxiety, increased access, and improved efficiency all sound like wins. The so what test asks you to go further. Reduced anxiety toward what? Access that leads to what kind of independence? Efficiency that shapes what kind of future? When you apply the test correctly, the focus shifts away from tools and toward trajectory. The question becomes whether systems are designed to help people gradually do more on their own, or whether support becomes permanent in ways that limit growth. The concern is not one student or one classroom. It is what happens when the same design decisions are replicated across schools, programs, and years. This is where the societal lens comes in. Societal impact is not about studying millions of people. It is about understanding how small choices, repeated at scale, become norms that influence equity, autonomy, and quality of life. The risk is cumulative, not dramatic. And that is exactly why it matters. If your topic does not pass the so what test at first, that is not failure. It is feedback. Most topics begin at the personal or local level. To improve them, you do not make them bigger. You make the consequence clearer. You articulate what happens over time, across contexts if nothing changes. A practical rule you can carry forward is this. Write one sentence that captures the full consequence chain. If we continue doing X, then Y becomes normalized, which leads to Z over time. If Z only affects one organization, you are not done. If Z would still matter even if your district or workplace disappeared, then your study has crossed into research territory. That is the purpose of the so what test. If Z only affects one organization, you are not done. If Z would still matter even if your district or workplace disappeared, then your study has crossed into research territory. That is the purpose of the so what test. It ensures your research is not just about what exists or what helps locally, but about what is at stake for people and systems over the long term if the issue remains unexamined.